So I've very often said that social media algorithms are absolutely awful. And they are. They're terrible. They're built with the intent to tell you what to buy, how to think, how to vote, all the different things that steadily chip away at our sense of autonomy as human beings, and often as magical practitioners. In point of fact, I can think of few traps more devastating than a magical practitioner than social media traps. After all the energy and time you spend in doom scrolling reel after reel or TikTok after TikTok is time you're not spending working on your own magical and psychological autonomy. And that kind of thing works for some people who choose to spend their lives pointlessly looking through media after media after media, but for the magical practitioner, it does definitely need to be different. Now, interestingly, when you learn how to use algorithms, when you learn how to very carefully cultivate where your attention goes in these systems, you can make some very interesting connections, both psychologically, socially, and magically. And that brings us to today's guest. Today's guest is none other than the Hexdoctor, Alexander Moore. Alex came to my attention through the magic of Instagram Reels, where he runs a no-holds-barred Reels game that is incredible and rife with magical influence when you learn how to look at it in a particular way. And as soon as I actually witnessed Alex's style of entrancing spellwork through Instagram Reels, I pretty instinctively knew that I needed to have him on the podcast just as the first guest in our re-emergence. As always, our conversation is informal and friendly, and the sheer drop and knowledge bombs that Alex drops in this conversation about subjects such as spirit diplomacy, spirit vision, and magic in general are truly phenomenal. I've really enjoyed putting this together for our re-emergence. So, without any further ado, Alex, how in the hell are you?
I'm doing well. As I said, I'm in the can't stop winning mindset, which I try to foist onto my students at all costs.
Can't stop winning. I really do love that. And I'm going to pretend like this isn't the third time we've had the beginning conversation because of connection issues here. But can't stop winning. That is such an important thing for magicians to really look at and reorient themselves for. But before we get to all that, let me ask you, what's your superhero origin story? When did you discover magic or magic discover you, as you will?
Superhero origin story. I'm one of those lucky people where both my parents are active occultists.
Oh,
Like not were, but are. Like to this day, still active, still training.
hmm.
The training it as a skill was like a very big part of growing up. In
Hmm.
fact, to the point where it was often discussed in my circles growing up that if you only have one skill in life, it should be magic because
Hmm.
it's the only one you really need. It fixes everything else. So I agree with that. I also support that thing. Doesn't make me the most popular person in certain circles, but I agree. So yeah, that's it. I mean, the long and short of it is I grew up with this. I've always sought
Hmm.
new teachers, new trainings. I still seek teachers, and even as a teacher, I have teachers and mentors.
Hmm.
I approach this like I approach like anyone would approach any skill they're passionate about.
Yeah.
And it's been a lifelong thing for me, 23 years at this point. And because I began when I was 13.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's the origin story, the long and the short of it.
Nice. Actually, yeah, that was succinct, but there's a lot to unpack there. And so many people these days are, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure you've heard the hot button argument right now about the whole witch blood debate,
Sure.
which that's such an interesting like way to look at things too. But it's fascinating to have magic automatically included in part of the upbringing. Did you find that that kind of gave you more options as you were, going through all the trials, tribulations of a young person that we all do?
Yeah, it only gives you more options. I mean, so magic, as I've often said, exists to answer scarcity with agency. And
Nice.
when you are a kid, now don't get me wrong, I'm going to say full out, I was not necessarily a fucking angel. I wasn't the nicest person. You give a
Hmm.
hormonal teenager magic and the go ahead
Yep.
to use, they're gonna cause some collateral damage. It was what it was. I
Yep.
I don't personally regret it, But yeah, I mean, my life has been genuinely charmed and blessed because I have
Hmm.
seen to it that it is that way.
Excellent. And that's beyond all is what I also try to like put out there with this podcast, all 5 episodes of this podcast, as well as, on the odd occasion that I have students as well, is that the agency, I think, is the most important difference between practicing magic and then practicing faith.
Mhm.
Faith, you just give up to something else and you accept what comes. Magic, you take an active hand in getting what it is that you want. And I think that that is such a great way of actually doing things. Can't stop winning. I'm gonna have to be inspired by that, if you don't mind. That and scarcity with agency. Good phrasing on that. So you currently have a number of classes that are available. Can you tell us which one is actually your favorite?
Mhm.
Like, what's your favorite
My
class
favorite, I
to
mean, my
teach? Yeah.
favorite personally is my spirit diplomacy. Yeah,
Okay.
my spirit diplomacy course is definitely the one because that one, without mincing words, it teaches you how to perceive and communicate with spirits.
Hmm.
And it gives it in a way that I find to be not just realistic, but
Hmm.
actionable in ways that a lot of people just don't walk you through. Like
Hmm.
I try to engage it with what have I heard behind closed doors from teachers that I've never seen in books?
Hmm.
And I approach it like that, but I also approach it very honestly, like this shit takes time. There's trial and error. You're going to practice every day. You're going to have to check to see if you're getting actionable information. You're going to have to accept the fact that you're going to be wrong a lot. You're going to think you heard something, think you
Hmm.
perceived something. It might be a calendar year of you being 60% wrong. And then, but you gotta stick it out. Because I look at it like anything else. And I try to explain to people, like, if you've never been in shape before and you go to the gym, you're gonna have to suffer your weakness for a
Hmm.
long time. If you've never played an instrument before and you pick up a guitar, you're gonna suck for a bit,
Hmm.
but you only suck for as long as it takes to push through the initial boundary. So what I say in that class too is like do these techniques and do them a lot. Like it's kind of like with divination, which I also wrap into there. If your
Hmm.
divination can't reasonably accurately predict what someone will do, you suck at it. Get better. And the way you
Yeah.
get better is you find a public figure like a YouTuber. This is a bit of free information for anybody. You
Hmm.
find a public figure like a YouTuber who goofs off and fucks up a lot, and you divine on what wacky antics are they up to next,
Hmm.
and you will have a target-rich environment to practice your shit. When I was growing up, my mom used to read tarot at the breakfast table about what my day would be like at school. And every day I'd come home, she'd be like, "Was I right?" And she would take notes. And she'd be like,
Nice.
"This is how
Okay.
correct I am. This is how wrong I was, right?" And I've done the
Hmm.
same thing. It's why I can do it as part of my job. Because nobody bats 1,000. And I tell people that in my classes all the time. You are never anyone who tells you they're never wrong is lying or stupid. Even the best remote viewers in the world, even the
Hmm.
best psychics in the world, the best trained, there's still a rate of failure like anything else. You
Hmm.
can be a prodigy level concert piano player and still play a shit gig. Like
Oh, yeah.
you will mess up eventually. And usually when it counts. And that's the thing I also bring up. I'm like, it needs to be, you need to accept that. You need to steel yourself against that early.
Hmm.
But another thing I teach is how the gigantic visual spirit perceptions that we all want, those are possible,
Hmm.
but you got to train them. Like for example, I rep automatic writing a lot, and people will decry that and say it's new agey. My
Hmm.
response is one: do you remember everything you're told in every conversation you hear? Because I see all these grimoire hounds, and I'm a grimoire guy as well.
Hmm.
Like lion skin belt and everything. I have the whole kit, and I fuck with
Okay.
that. But
Nice.
like I see all these grimoire guys, like, oh, this is what this spirit told me, and it's this like 7-page quotation. And I'm like, you did not remember all that verbatim, you lying son of a bitch. Like, you wrote it down when the
Yeah.
spirit was talking to you. Now, was that not a form of automatic writing? Did it not guide your hand? Because I'll ask them, like, when you're experiencing the spirit, do you have tunnel vision? Do you feel a little bit high? Do you feel a little bit weird? They're like, yeah, 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 right. And then you see the spirit, right?
Hmm.
Right. So how do you know? Because I've done this. I've straight up filmed myself doing grimoire magic, and it's
Hmm.
me talking to an empty room. But I saw some shit.
Yeah.
Also, a benefit of having a family that does it is me and my old man did it together
Hmm.
and filmed that shit. And it was two guys looking like larpy idiots, talking to an empty room, but we know that we saw the same thing.
Yeah.
And we know that when we asked it to do something, it did what we asked it to do. So the question is, what is spirit perception? In my opinion, it is your visionary capacity causing you to hallucinate and spirits then being telekinetic.
Hmm.
And again, so does it matter if it wasn't literally like recorded on on an iPhone there if it moved some shit across the room? No, it moved some shit across the room. That's based as hell. That's awesome.
Hmm.
And it's cool that that happened and you did
Yeah.
it. You did that. You pulled that thing out of nowhere and put it there.
Yeah.
It came to you. And so I teach like ways of training this up so you can get to the point where you can perceive spirits
Hmm.
that clearly, that cleanly, without having to rely on a 9-day fast and 4 hours of evocation to get
Hmm.
to, an experience where you have this big visionary moment. And also, not every spirit's going to speak to you that way. I go into that. I go into like
Hmm.
different spirits talk differently, and you need to be prepared for that. Different spirits are going to communicate differently. Methods of not just enhancing one's mediumship, but enhancing, one's ability to create a space in which spirits can manifest
Hmm.
and places where you can find the holes in your own game in terms of like where your skills are, where your natural aptitudes are, where they're not,
Hmm.
how to work on your strengths, that kind of thing. And I focus pretty heavily on that.
Actually, yeah, what I was really interested in what you had to say was the spirits using telekinesis and leaning into your strengths.
Yeah.
Uh,
So
yeah, go for it.
so when I talk about the spirits being, telekinetic, a lot of people
Hmm.
will have experiences of like, oh, the spirit moved something, or, when I asked it to put its mark on the parchment for the pact, there is like an indentation or a smudge or, a discoloration in the parchment. Like
Hmm.
they can influence our world. They can really, really do that if
Hmm.
especially if you pull them close enough. And as far as the aspects of the class that will teach a person how to find like their strengths versus their weaknesses and how to really engage with that, I teach a lot of like, exercises about like, okay, try this or try this or try that. And depending on which ones work for you, that's the route you want to go down to start. Maybe you are a really, really good automatic writer,
Hmm.
or maybe you're really good at divination. Um, and then, maybe you're not so great at visionary experiences.
Hmm.
Well, okay, cool. The initial goal, of course, is that the magic works, that it produces excellent results, not piddling results in your life,
Hmm.
but markedly sorcerous results that in many cases could only have been magic. That is, of course, the goal. The
Yeah.
goal is always to look at this shit and go, wow, you know what? I did this. Like, there was advice, came from several sources, really. I couldn't point to the first time I ever heard this, but it was like every time you succeed in magic, you should write it down in like a master list,
Hmm.
then reread that list once a month or once a quarter if the list gets huge, just to remind yourself of all that you've accomplished. Because the brain sort of defends itself against the reality of magic. A big thing I fight against in my career relentlessly is skepticism, is
Hmm.
the disbelievers, is the naysaying horse shit about like, oh well, doesn't actually work in huge ways. Yes, it absolutely does.
Oh yeah.
Categorically, it absolutely does. Just because you cannot do it doesn't mean it is not currently being done
Hmm.
by someone out there. And the way I've always looked at this is in no other skill do people assume the Olympic version of that thing does not exist. It should be the same in magic. Virtuosity exists in this skill
Hmm.
as anything else. It's simply a matter of execution and diligence. That is all that separates you from miracles, is doing it every day. Because most people, when they enter a psychic development program of any kind, they'll fuck with it for like 2 months and get very little results and then put it down. Like the
Hmm.
astral projection is a perfect example. Even those of us who have had astral projection experiences,
Hmm.
most of the time, will be like, oh, yeah, I made that happen twice. And I'll be like, can you do it now? Right now? Like once upon a time called right now? And people will be like, well, no. And I'm like, skill issue, your fault.
Yep.
You chose that. You chose to be unable to do this because people refuse to look at magic like anything else. And that frustrates me to no end because it is a craft, a skill, and an art like any other. And, just because it's hard, and it is hard, just because it's hard doesn't mean it isn't worth it. Because a thing I tell students one-on-one a lot is time will pass regardless of what you do.
Hmm.
So if it takes you, and it may not, and it will likely not even take you this long, but let's say it takes you a calendar year to gain really solid spirit perception,
Hmm.
like to the point where like you see shit with your naked eyes frequently. Well, that year is going to go by anyway.
Yeah.
That year, you don't control the passage of time. It will leave you behind. And another thing I say a lot in teaching, and it's a thing that like I like to add when I talk about these things, is there's this perception among a lot of my students, because the average age of my students is 40.
Hmm.
There's this perception among a lot of my students that, it's a little too late or a little bit, it's kind of past the prime of learning such things. And that is deeply tragic to me. The idea that our world essentially fetishizes the marriage of youth and prodigy level skill and nothing
Hmm.
else. And to that,
Yep.
I'll say, yeah, you can't be 20 years old and amazing at magic. As someone who grew up with magic, I was certainly not
Hmm.
amazing by 20 years old. I'll tell you that right now.
Yeah.
But
Same.
yeah, sure. I definitely reveled in the fact that I was a kid who knew he was magic.
Hmm.
And one of the best things ever. And I wish other people could have that. But if you can't, then you can't. Doesn't mean you still can't be awesome. Doesn't mean, just because you're not like the great granddaughter of a witch from Scotland or whatever the fuck, like,
Hmm.
doesn't mean you can't be as powerful as what you're thinking. It's a matter because even then, I've known people who came from legacies
Hmm.
who didn't have magic to rub between their fingers because they were lazy. They didn't
Yeah.
work. All the natural talent in the world is meaningless without training.
Just like learning a language, lose it or use it. And
Exactly.
that's it. I mean, it's actually, yeah, I mean, neurologically, that's how it cues up. And, as a psych dude and a hypnotist, that's exactly what I see, both in terms of magic and even just sheer intellectual capacity. If you're not continually pushing your boundaries, in the case of psychology or intellect, just studying and being amongst people who are intelligent and speak like you. But in magic, it's more of, are you doing magic every single day of some way, shape, or form?
Hmm.
If not, I mean, the spirit's got better things to do. They're going to wander off and they're going to do their own thing if you're not sitting there and being a good host, or at least, in my experience, which is not everyone else's.
No, sure. I mean, I agree with you. I feel the same. I
Yeah.
mean, but again, it's choosing to make the time. It's choosing to
Mhm.
go, hey, I'm gonna relinquish 30 minutes of my Netflix binge every day and do inner fire practice or something. Like,
Hmm.
shout out to inner fire practice. Love inner fire practice. Big fan. Everyone should do it.
Oh,
But
yeah.
but that's the thing. I mean, but even looking at like other sorts of development, like another thing and I don't talk about this exactly at my courses, but a thing that I continue to bring up is
Hmm.
this idea, and I wrote an article about this on the Practical Occult site. This idea of like people having this cartoonish notion that like they'll meet this amazing legacy sorcerer who is exactly value aligned with them and takes them under
Hmm.
their wing for free and teaches them all this stuff and gives them all the perfect training, and it's this like
Hmm.
super ancient legacy thing. And like that's not exactly gonna happen to you, my dude. You're gonna have to figure a lot of shit out like the rest of us and do a lot of training that you're gonna
Hmm.
think is hokey and not
Hmm.
like I said before, I am a grimoire dude.
Hmm.
I do all sorts of other magic. Good, and I tell this story a lot to my students, and I've told it I think on another podcast. But my father put me onto Jose Silva's The Silva Method
Oh, yeah.
when I was in high school,
Hmm.
and I thought it was I was like, no, I summon demons and shit. Like I'm a badass. I did this. No, man. After a weekend training of that, I was sold.
Hmm.
I mean, and things like that. But people will look at it like, oh, well, this is nothing. But also, I've had the opportunity to go study with a lot of people in and outside of the United States. And, sometimes the old witch in the forest will teach you the Silva method without knowing that it's the
Yeah.
Silva method, so even down to like the whole, oh, yeah, just tell yourself when you're in the deep cave of your soul,
Hmm.
the alpha trance. Uh,
Yeah.
Tell yourself that when you put your fingers in this position, you can get back there anytime you want. And I was like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
You could buy this training on the internet in MP3 form, like, and just diligently do it. But that's what I
Mm-hmm.
mean. Like, people will sleep on so much good training because they think they're too proud. They think that, like, oh well, this is some new agey shit or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even then, like, you're a hypnosis guy. I'm
Yeah.
not a hypnosis guy, but I've known people who use self-hypnosis or who agree to hypnotize each other, like two
Mm-hmm.
people, to be like, no, you are an amazing scryer. You can see spirits. You can
Oh
do this.
yeah.
Had amazing results with that.
Oh yeah, that I've done that with my more witchy clients who show up. And I mean, I've had legitimate spirits slamming doors and people's face changing when an ancestor comes through just in the middle of trance. 100% the hypnosis and magic. They're just chef's kiss together. It's beautiful.
Dude, absolutely, 100%. I mean, like I said, I'm not like a David Ellman, like, pure hypnosis student or
Hmm.
whatever. But like I said, like the self-hypnosis stuff in various psychic development programs I've studied
Hmm.
is a huge boon. But it's kind of funny because I've also felt this way. This is good. This is a bit of a ramble, but I've also felt this way about how people will sleep on, like, new thought and, like,
Hmm.
your Joseph Murphys or your Neville Goddards or whatever.
Hmm.
And at the same time, though, you'll talk to, like, a yogi or something, and they'll be like, oh yeah, but, like, you need to live in the future where you're already successful with your
Hmm.
sadhana. And I'm like, right, assume the state of the wish fulfilled, the feeling is the secret. And they're like, yeah, yeah, that's exactly what I mean. Where'd you hear that? Like, so,
I
like,
get that.
there's a lot around there, and I think people really sleep on things that could help them. Like, another example is, like, Bankston image cycling.
Oh,
Dude,
yeah.
people
I'm a big fan of
crush with
Bixton.
that.
Hmm.
People crush with that. And I mean, people have healed cancer with that.
Yeah. You talk about
And
applicable magic, removal of cancer and disease states. I mean, it doesn't get more amazing than that, truthfully.
oh, dude, hard agree, hard agree. So, like, that's why I always tell people, like, you need to, it's not just training, interacting with your spirits, which is hugely important. As a die-hard animist
Hmm.
myself, like, I am all about, we live in a spirit world.
Hmm.
Like, there is no separation, in my opinion. There's only a matters of degree. But,
Yeah.
like, also training the magic that is in you, training your spirit, training your soul, your mind is the other side. And I find that when people skip that second part because it seems hokey or new agey or it's just too hard, their
Mhm.
magic inevitably suffers because of it.
I have seen so many times that people, both students and other practitioners, who they come out of the gate charging and, they go through the sparkle phase like we all do, and everything works for the first couple of weeks. And then the hard work starts, and it's like you can see the cataracts start to grow over their eyes when they realize the amount of work and discipline it takes to not just to deprogram everything society tells us about the world,
Mhm.
but everything that's, reinforces in many ways the inconsequence of the ego, the part of us that thinks that we're us and not the soul within us. And it's
Right.
one of those things. And I love the phrase that you're using, people sleep on it because they do. It's like they just go. I hate to bring role-playing games into it, but back in the 90s and early aughts, I would play Mage the Awakening from the old White Wolf publishing company, and that was the phrase that they used for people who would not
Oh yeah,
acknowledge or
sleepers. Yeah,
practice
yeah,
magic.
no. That
Yeah.
that was that was actually Mage the Ascension, not Mage the Awakening. So you're also talking to a die-hard White Wolf fan.
Nice.
Like,
And you're right. They rebranded into the
yeah,
awakening.com.
so New World of Darkness, Mage the Awakening, very
Hmm.
bad. Mage the Ascension, very good. Best role-playing game of all time, in my opinion.
Oh, yeah.
But but yeah, man, no, you're absolutely, I mean, I absolutely agree. Also, interestingly enough, are you familiar with the book The Mentalist's Handbook? I rep this thing on every fucking interview because one day Clint
Hmm.
Marsh will hear me
Hmm.
and he will actually put out the new edition that he promised that keeps getting pushed back every time. And one day he'll recognize that I made him hundreds of dollars. But
He's gonna just walk and be like, "Oh, it's you."
I hope so. That guy, because again, the Mentalist Handbook is a great psychic development book. It's the fucking goat, to be honest.
Hmm.
But, like, the visual artist in there also did a lot of the art for the Mage or the Ascension, like,
Hmm.
tradition books, like the Sons of Ether book and the Hermetic Order book.
Hmm.
So just, shout out to the fact that really cool magical people worked on that game. But
Oh yeah, definitely.
yeah, man, no, I agree. And that's kind of the thing that's really interesting about when you have trained like real
Hmm.
spirit perception, um real psychic ability, real spiritual, etheric, structure based stuff. You know, it really is a difference between like doing magic and being magical, right? Like there's
Yes.
a lot about that, and I do intend at some point in this year to put out a course on like etheric magic and that kind of
Hmm.
stuff. 'Cause I think it's hard. It's going to be hard for me to say a lot of things that haven't already been said, like to
Hmm.
say like my own new stuff. So I'm really like working on it. But I think that with what I've been teaching my students and how they've been doing well, I'm going to put something like that together that's really cool. But like I said, I think that people really miss out when they're not approaching things in that sort of way. And there are teachers out there besides me who approach it like that. And I think they're all gems of people.
Hmm.
Uh, but yeah, I think that's important because in my opinion, and it's kind of funny because, you know, as a guy who just put out a class on Saint Magic, I am very skeptical of religion.
Yep.
I think that religion is statecraft and is going to diminish your ability to be magical. I think that approaching religions as pantheons and as spiritual technology, you can harvest a lot of useful stuff. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's why I'm teaching a class on saints and not how to be a Protestant. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the Protestant class, I'm sure you could probably find a number of versions of that somewhere, but direct that taking the power away from religion, intercessionary religion especially, and just go to a God and, say hello. So much vital power and life enhancement involved in that rather than go to a priest and put the money in the tray and go sing your ass off for the week.
oh, sure. I mean, that's kind of the difference between what is largely labeled folk Catholicism and
Hmm.
papal Catholicism. You know, like
Mm.
you go to a Catholic mass or an Orthodox mass. I'm more familiar with Catholicism because my mother's people are Catholic,
Hmm.
but they're like magic Catholic. Um, and so like you go there, you see an old lady go up and light a candle to pray, and then when
Hmm.
she leaves, another old lady goes up, blows out her candle, and then relights that candle and prays that the energy of this woman's prayers are siphoned into her prayers.
Oh, wow.
That's folk Catholicism. You know, praying for Saint Lucy to make your enemy literally
Hmm.
blind is
Yep.
folk Catholicism. You know, burying Saint Joseph in the ground so he sells your house faster. You
Yep.
know, it's this approach with animism. There's this saying that I believe is associated with Brazilian Kimbanda. That's where I first heard of it. I'm not in Kimbanda, but I heard it from a Kimbandero,
Hmm.
where that God is big, but the forest is bigger, in the sense that
I like
you
it.
know, it's one of many, right? And that's the thing I try to teach because like I look at Saint Magic as essentially an animistic holdover from like Greco-Roman hero cults.
Hmm.
There's fundamentally no difference between how people worked with Hercules
Hmm.
than how they work with you know, Saint Christopher, for example. Or like now keep in mind, I will say this, but I will also preface with I am not a syncretist. I am not one
Hmm.
of those people who believes that Thor is Zeus, is Shango, is whatever. I think they're separate things. But I do
Hmm.
think that Saint Expedite is probably Hermes. Like
Yeah.
I'm gonna give it to him. I'm gonna give it to Quick Boy on that
Hmm.
one. I think that that one's Hermes. I may be wrong, but I'm gonna go out of my way and say I think that that's probably Hermes. But when you approach that kind of thing, and especially because in so much of the world, you know, like in the Catholic world especially, I've known recently in my life witches in Italy who
Hmm.
hide doing a lot of magic behind the veneer of I'm very Catholic.
Hmm.
You know, but folk Catholicism is also the whole like I'm gonna go do some diabolical magic on Saturday, go to confession on Sunday, and now I'm in the clear.
Yep.
Like I'm good. Because that's the thing. I mean, having done that, having like gone to confession and be like, all right, here it is. Here's the dastardly shit I've gotten up to. Like there's power in that.
Oh,
Like playing the
absolutely.
game.
That's the whole
But
Mardi
like,
Gras mentality too. Just
oh
get it all
yeah,
out
man.
and then say you're sorry. Yeah.
Now, of course, you know, I think that my Saint Magic class will kind of rub very Catholic magicians the wrong way.
Hmm.
people who are like, oh no, I believe in this sort of thing. You shouldn't just be, aping the tradition for its magical potency and whatnot. And respectfully, I disagree. Um, I am absolutely going to follow the protocol and make relationships with these individual spirits who will mostly tell you that you should probably be more Catholic.
Yeah.
But because Catholicism has an infinite capacity to forgive pretty much any horrible thing you do, with the exception of like a couple, you can work that out. The dual faith observance is a real thing in a lot of way. And if you can do dual, you can do tri, you can do quad faith. I mean, again, if you got the
Mhm.
time, you got the hours in the day, you got the time, you can do it all. And I'm a big fan of um eclectic approaches to magic
Mhm.
that work. The key thing. I'm not here to mix traditions or mix systems, but I am like, yeah, I cross-train a bunch of systems because I love it. It's like, why do you speak multiple languages? Because I adore it. Not that I am multilingual. I'm
Mhm.
tragically American in that way. I only speak English and bad English. But like, it's like, why do you play multiple instruments? Because it delights me. Why you do multiple kinds of magic? Because it delights me. But in that same thing, I've also found students with, I guess, what you would probably term religious trauma to
Mm.
really empower themselves by being like, no, I can engage with saint magic, make my life better, and approach this because it's very visceral. Like if you have like Saint Martha the Dominator who will like keep your cheating husband at home from and not cheat on you.
Mhm.
That's like a very helpful thing. That's a very like, I'm taking my power back in the world thing. If you have Saint Expedite who can bring you pretty much anything very quickly,
Mm.
even if and especially if it breaks the world around you in the process.
Yep.
There's real power in that. But there's also mysteries. There's like Saint Christopher has the head of a wolf, real Saint Christopher, not like post Vatican II where he's like a person.
Yeah.
But like the fact that there's like werewolf magic in the entire Catholic and Orthodox Christian world that
Mhm.
relates around Saint Christopher as a patron of teaching you like how to astral project as a wolf.
Mhm.
That's awesome. How can anyone see that and go, that isn't the coolest fucking thing I've heard all day?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
so the way I don't personally know the werewolf magic. It isn't a thing I have studied, but I have known people who have.
Mhm.
But like you learn that by going to these spirits and asking them like, how do I do it? Like once you do some novenas, you get them helping you out, you get them hooking you up. You go,
Mhm.
okay, cool. How do I do what you do? How can like teach me how to do stuff? Because like you'll see people with these elaborate saint altars and they have like, fetish charms on them and statues full of like human finger bone dust and all kinds of awesome shit.
Mhm.
The necromantic aspect of it has always been beautiful to me. But then again, the things about Catholicism that are beautiful to me are the fact that it's like decadence with like gold leaf on it. It's the fact that it's a death cult. It's a memento mori, goth as hell, beautiful thing full of all this magic for the harvesting. And I am tired of pretending like it's not. I'm tired of being like, nah. Because,
Yeah.
like for example, I have seen poppets that were bound in rosaries into which prayers of domination and binding were prayed.
Mhm.
Like I've seen sick call crucifixes, the ones that open up
Mhm.
with the two candle holders. I've seen those used as portable altars for all sorts of magic.
Yeah, even the conservative, I'm gonna not get super political on this, but even the highly conservative Christians here in Texas, even they will hear the word witch and, your name, like my name and so many others I know here, get on certain target lists and they start praying against us. And it's just kind of funny because you'll have Reverend so and so up, Reverend Jethro, or whoever up leading a misguided prayer to pray for misfortune to fall upon people, but at the same time they fear the evil wiles and magics of the witch themselves. It's kind of like it's the same language, but it's just that different accent. In Christianity, I love the fact that you're pointing out the death cult portion of it, because there's that kind of wonderfully apocalyptic, we're all getting ready for the world to end and we're all going to die and see what happens after that kind of vibe to it, which so fascinating to observe from the outside portion.
Oh, sure. But even if you look at like the animism of like the Catholicism practiced by people, I mean, there are so many stories about like in you know the old world, I guess you'd call it,
Hmm.
of like, oh yeah, I'm Catholic, and this fairy is also Catholic. Like she chose to convert to Catholicism, and
Hmm.
or like, you got my boy and the lady of ladies, Cyprian and Justina,
Hmm.
love to death, huge fan, 10 out of 10. They're you sit with those saints
Hmm.
in a visionary experience, and you're speaking to them, you're communing with them, and you're like, okay, well, tell me, like explain it to me. Like, why are you okay with me doing sorcery when like I'm not supposed to? And their response is, mysteries are vast, and for those who can claim them, for those who can perceive them, for those who can love the mysteries and love the magic and love these things, this is a doorway. And just because that doorway is surrounded by people who can't perceive it doesn't mean it isn't for you. Doesn't mean it isn't for you to walk through if you are bold enough, if you're willing to do it. Because that's the thing. I mean, it creates a perception of the world as just so vast. And it's not even just Catholicism's like this. I mean, look at Buddhism, right? Like, you
Hmm.
go to like a Dharma center somewhere and you'll see the most sterilized form of Buddhism ever. And then you go to like Thailand and they're like, Jesus is a Laercy. And also, here's my weird
Hmm.
Buddhist ritual to make this horse have diarrhea and die because of the Dharma. And like they'll mean it.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Like they'll be serious. They'll be like, nah, bro. Like I said what I said.
Yeah, Thai magic is something amazing to actually behold. The old folk magic of the villages in the Pacific Rim can get pretty
Oh yeah.
fascinating to
Oh
watch.
yeah, dude. Huge. But also like I mean, you want to talk about witchcraft. Even in this is the thing I also try to bring up. Like all these big witch cults in Europe and these like big witch traditions, they're awesome
Mhm.
and they're very real, but we have them in the US as
Oh,
well. Like
absolutely.
people don't like to think that because for whatever reason, they're okay going to like a very rural member of another culture because we in
Hmm.
America are fascinated by accents. And I'm guilty. I really am. If I hear someone
Yeah.
with like a Celtic accent of any kind, I'm like, wow, you're so cool. They can be dumb as hell. And I'm like, that's so cool. But hey, we are none of us free from sin,
No.
especially not me. But
Yeah.
but like, you'll see like people hiding pagan deities, powerful land spirits, like the
Hmm.
ghosts of dead witches behind icons of saints and shrines of things.
Hmm.
And, and it's funny because you'll see like a whole wall of icons, and then one of them will be upside down. And then you pick it up off the wall and it'll be hollowed out on the back, and you'll see like a mummified toad
Yep.
like pinned in there, and you're like, what the fuck? It's that fucking cool.
Yep.
It's that awesome. But like, you can, and again, like studying the lore of these saints. But even then, you have things like folk saints, like Jesus Malverde
Mm. Yeah.
and Santissima Muerte, neither of whom I have a practice with. I want to make that clear.
Hmm.
But like, there are folk saints even more than that. I mean, it's like, oh, there was this guy who saved these people from a mine cave in and died himself. And then you contact his spirit. He's basically a chimera. He's like a rock man, like who's like
Hmm.
merged with mind spirits, and then you can be like, cool, I'm going to make a statue of you and I'm going to give you offerings and you're going to help me in this whole town, and he becomes a folk saint. Like
Hmm.
like you can make your own saints. You know what I mean? Like that's the coolest thing. But also a reason why I put the class out is I try to tell so many people, especially in the Catholic world, like if you already have the baptism, whether you wanted it or not, that's an initiation you should probably take advantage of.
Hmm.
Like it's there for you anyway. And also if you need to hide your magic from someone, you can be more Catholic. Now, to that said, that doesn't mean that's going to fly with like, a Protestant or like a Baptist or whatever. Like they're going to see that as idolatry and they're going to have problems with it. But, you really can. But even then, I mean, there are conjure lineages in America that are like very, very Protestant or
Hmm.
Baptist on the surface, but they're like, oh, that's Saint Expedite in the corner. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Or that's
He's
my
just
shrine.
he's
Yeah.
just wearing a mask at this
Right. Or
point.
that's my
Yeah.
shrine to the Crossroads man. Or, that's Black Hawk. They'll have
Hmm.
like a Native American man's bust in like a cauldron of like graveyard dirt, and don't worry about it. You know what I mean? So like, but I think that kind of shit's beautiful. Like some people will look at it as hypocrisy, and I look at it as just smart thinking. Like engaging
Hmm.
in earnest with the spirits around you, creating, these connections with these spirits. Because the funny thing, and I was actually having this conversation the other day with a colleague of mine, and they were saying like, oh, what do you think you're going to piss people off with the Saint Magic course? And I'm like, I hope so. And they're like, what do you mean you hope so? And I'm like, no, like I want to shake it up a little bit. I want to have this because at the end of the day, either we're allowed to do this, allowed in air quotes, either like we're either we can get away with it or we're all fucked.
Oh yeah.
It really kind of comes down to that if you're being intellectually honest about it.
Hmm.
It's either all okay or it's not okay. And if that's the case and you're doing it, you might as well go whole hog. Now keep in mind, it's a very Catholic point of view
Hmm.
because all sins are more or less equal. So if you're going to go to confession, I dated this girl because I went to a Catholic college
Hmm.
because it had a chapel there that I could sneak in and do magic in. But uh, I dated this girl, Peruvian girl, lovely girl,
Hmm.
and she was a debaucherous legend of a woman. But she would tell me, she's like, I got, if I'm gonna sin, I'm gonna have something to talk about in the confessional. Like I'm gonna make it worth my while. And I'm just saying,
Yeah.
if you're gonna be doing magic, you better make it worth your while because, as I always say, one of my Alex taglines, the things you want in the world are real. Someone's gonna get them. It might as well be you. How do you get them? Fucking magic.
Yep.
Like get good, train and summon some spirits and have all this stuff. I hope I didn't ramble too long on that one. I just get passionate about it.
No, that's good. I love when I can see practitioners kind of get into that zone and you kind of have to start wondering like where the line, because the line always gets blurry when one of us gets up in our head in that certain space, and you kind of have to wonder if everything you're talking is like you, and then one part of it is the spirit coming through and the deeper mind, and it's beautiful to watch when any practitioner goes into that ramble space.
Mhm.
That's just fun. So circling back real quick, the method in which spirits will interact. Now, you keep talking about visionary experiences, which has always been a weakness of mine. I've always been a kinesthetic detector, like feel when they're there and stuff. I was born an intuitive, and that's just kind of how I
Mhm.
was wired. Now, one of my favorite things to share a brief story. I work very strongly and closely with Hecate, and the other night I
Mhm.
was wondering out loud to Hecate, like, what epithet of yours do I need to work with right now at this point in time in my life? And I was asking this while I was walking one of my dogs, a little black terrier. So obviously I'm talking to Hecate while walking my little black dog.
Mhm.
And no sooner do I ask that question than my dog goes nuts, jumps into the bushes, leaps back out with a dead snake in its mouth to drop it at my feet. And I'm
Oh,
like,
nice.
quickest reply ever. Thank you.
Right, right.
And it's always been interesting to me where people will have visionary experiences because you put in the work to actually see them. And
Mhm.
I've gotten so far as to see the distortion in the air when they appear, and that's fine. I'm fine being at that point. But those subtle moments where synchronicity lines up and those highly dubious coincidences occur and then avalanche down upon you. How does that work with the way that you interact with spirits, with their not telekinetic, but their coincidental appearances?
Okay. So that's a good that's a good one. So a couple of things. One, I would actually say that kinesthetic feelings of spirit contact are gateways to visionary experience. So really quick on that, a big
Mhm.
free lesson for anyone listening. There
Awesome.
are different kinds of visions you can have. So there's a
Mhm.
vision in your forehead, your third eye. There's a vision in your two normal eyes, but you have a whole sensory suite of a body. What is a vision in your hands like? What is a vision in your gut like? An old teacher of mine would always tell me to ask spirits to show me where they came alive in my body. And they would take the form perhaps of like a rib aching or a
Mhm.
tingle on one part of my body. And that became the signature of when they were there. And I would know them by that. But also,
Mhm.
if you're good at projecting your consciousness, like putting your consciousness in parts of your body, which if,
Mhm.
if you're if you're big into like tantra and stuff like me, that's a big thing. So let's say, for example, you're like, okay, Hakate, where are you? And you feel like an ache in your right wrist.
Mhm.
Put your consciousness there right then. Fall into it and see what you can perceive, see what you're shown, because that can be a gateway to vision.
Mhm.
You'll all of a sudden have, maybe it starts small, like a knowing, or maybe you'll see a flash of an image, or maybe you'll see a very, very vivid daydream that
Gotcha.
isn't a daydream. right? That's how you chase the vision. You chase
Hmm.
the serpent's tail that way. And
Gotcha.
eventually you'll catch it. But it's about keeping in mind, like if your body shows it to you that way, you can
Hmm.
go ahead. Now, of course, I always tell people to have like a yes or no divination medium, like a pendulum or dice or something, to
Hmm.
be like, hey, did I catch that right? And don't be afraid to be told no.
Yeah.
'Cause then you can be like, okay, do it again. Please repeat that. And then you'll feel the thing in your body again and you try again. And you may need to tell, and you may need to be like, hey, I'm sorry, I'm gonna need you to do that like 10 more times until I get it right. And a lot of spirits will respect your diligence and your focus. So I often tell students to do that. Now, as far as the web way of communications of spirits in our world, they're always talking, just like we're always talking.
Right.
They will send synchronicities. Your lexicon of omens is going to be different than somebody else's.
Hmm.
There's no universal like a snake means this or this means that or whatever. It depends on what spirit's talking to you, who you are, what you're doing, what you've trained in, that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Now, I will say a funny story is there are omens that transfer. Like, for example, I have never been the kind of person who puts water on a shrine and then like all the bubbles appear.
Yeah.
It's just never been a thing that I have had happen. But a friend of mine made me this Saint Expedite oil many years ago, and he does have like that kind of thing happen. In my Saint Expedite shrine, when I use that oil, the bubbles
Hmm.
appear. So his
Hmm.
lexicon of omens bled into mine, but it's only when I use the thing he made. And so
Interesting.
that's a really intriguing like point of concept where spirits are like, okay, this is how I talk to him, but
Hmm.
I'm talking to you through the method that he made. So, right, X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
Now, keeping abreast of the things our spirits show us is also a sort of practice in itself. Like you're not always going to be great, and you can also fall into the category of like too much main character syndrome if you're not
Hmm.
careful. Of like,
Hmm.
oh, everything is a sign, everything is an omen, and everything is talking to me. And it's like it's really not.
No,
Like
not at all.
it's not all that serious, I promise. But it can be, and it many times is, which is why I'm always a big fan of, at the end of a day or perhaps like once a week, if you like jot down your list of like these are the cool things that happen, go to your spirits and be like, was this real? Was this real? Was this real? And again,
Hmm.
it seems time consuming and it seems like it might maybe downplay your ability to trust yourself, but it actually does the opposite. It idiot checks you because again, you're still relatively new at this.
Hmm.
And if you keep doing it and you keep getting good and you keep getting that focus, you will have larger, more shiny experiences, as well as having a greater number of more, for lack of a better word, mundane seeming experiences.
Yeah, it's always been interesting when we talk about the strengths that the individual practitioner can develop. One of the things that Jason Miller goes
Mhm.
into is a lot of people will focus on trying to be well-rounded, and while others will focus on their strengths and improving their strengths as much as possible. And I'm paraphrasing terribly. Jason, if by happenstance you see this, I apologize if I misquote you. But there's kind of a check and balance there because not being somebody who's visually oriented, I know when I see Hecate in my mind's eye come forward and zipping right up to me, I know for certain that that's not my imagination playing as much.
Mhm.
Whereas putting the solid effort in to develop those visionary experiences, would you say, and I'll defer to you in this because you're much more visionary than I am, would you say that that would increase the likelihood of false data in that sense, or would it perhaps minimize it?
Well, it depends on when in the process you are,
Oh.
because much like anything else, like if you're like a naturally gifted brawler
Hmm.
and then you go like learn Muay Thai, you're gonna feel like you suck all of a sudden
Hmm.
because you're putting yourself in a different structure. Or like let's say you're a good striking combatant and you want to go learn jujitsu.
Hmm.
You're gonna suck real bad for a while. And you may feel a backslide if you're trying to train experiences that you are not really naturally gifted towards, or you might
Hmm.
not. You might find yourself growing evenly. It really depends on the practitioner. Now, when it comes to like false information,
Hmm.
you will once you channel a better visionary experience, if you don't train it well with with idiot checking, you will be
Mhm.
prone to experiencing things. It's like the old adage of if your spirits are only telling you what you want to hear, you're making
Mhm.
it up.
Oh yeah.
And if you hear a lot of stuff that you maybe don't want to hear, you're probably hearing them correctly.
Yep.
But also, some spirits will just play tricks on you. Some spirits will fuck with you. If you're not careful, some
Mhm.
spirits will test you. Now, I hesitate to say that because some people out there think that spirits are testing and trying us all the time. And I don't
Mhm.
personally think that's true.
Mhm.
I think that there's a degree to which that is true, but there's also a degree to which where like you're not important enough for them to test you 24/7. Like you
True.
like you ain't it, chief. I think also a very important thing to think about when it comes to expanding visionary capacity. Because again, like I do have good visionary capacity,
Mhm.
but also I train the other stuff too. Like I would say I have a reasonably good all around capacity based on training with people who have had a good all around capacity. Um, but like I will also say the different spirits, as I said before, speak through different means. And again, another factor of this, which does go into what you were saying, is being able to accurately perceive where you are that day. Like there are some days when I just can't see them, can't hear them, can't do anything worth a shit. And so I will default to automatic writing and divination methods and the
Mhm.
pendulum. Because I'm like, well, fuck, if I can't hear you, I can at least you can at least guide my hand and tell me stuff if I need to know. Because some days it's just not that. And I've had plenty of times, man, where at any level I've been at now, then whatever, where I've been like, okay, cool, I got this. And then I'll bring that up to a spirit and be like, hey, you said this. And they're like, I never said that. Like you misheard me.
Mhm.
'Cause, the times I haven't checked, or like there are times and I'll check and I'll be like, did I get this right? They'll be like, no, no, you didn't. I'm like,
Yeah.
fuck, really? Like, and it can be frustrating, humbling. No,
Oh
but
yeah.
that never goes away. The people I train with, the people I train under now,
Mhm.
who I look up to, will say the same thing. They're like, yeah, I'm not always right. Like sometimes I mishear them. And that's a sign of genuine humility that leads to good skill because I've also known people who were excellent occultists who were like, I'm never wrong. I never mishear spirits. I never misinterpret anything. And they were good at magic, like straight up by any metric that I consider good, they were good.
Mhm.
But they were also so pig-headed that they wouldn't accept that like sometimes you just don't hear it right or you don't because I mean think
Mhm.
about it too. Once again, in the effort to like make magic like other things, do you understand the point of view of everyone you speak to? Have you never misinterpreted what somebody said? Have you never willfully misheard some shit because your emotions are that in it?
Yep.
Like, this is another thing that I recommend to people. And I understand that it sounds like this big advertisement for me or my industry, but like if you really need to know if you heard some shit right, go to a diviner and have them look into it.
Mhm.
Like, doctors have other doctors.
Oh yeah. Never diagnose yourself. And if you have the resources, like talk to one diviner and then double check with another diviner if things are a little too coincidental for you or convenient for you, I should
Right.
say.
But
Right.
also like this is why like having the like beta reader dynamic, so to speak. Like if you're like a fiction writer,
Hmm.
you have like, your blood pacted beta reader where you read their shit and they read your shit, until
Hmm.
you're dead.
Yeah.
Um, And then, do the same thing with friends who are good at divination. Be like, hey, I need you to check on this shit, and I will always check yours if you always check mine. And then that can really help because I've had times where I've had people, peers of mine, look into my shit and in the most affirming way be like, nah, dude, you got it exactly right. Like that really cool thing that you really wanted to be true is totally true. And I'm
Oh
like,
yeah.
oh, thank fuck, that's awesome. But I've also had the opposite, been like, nah, man, I'm sorry. Like I know you're emotionally invested in this being true, but it just isn't.
Yeah.
And that can be a crushing blow. But that's another thing too. Just like any other thing, you need to be able to humbly court failure.
Hmm.
The old adage of like you need to fail more times than most people even try.
Oh yeah.
You
Yeah. Yeah.
gotta. That's how this is, and that's how any of this is.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, the question will always remain: is your magic good or is it not? Do you have the life that you want or do you not? Like it's a question that really vexes
Mhm.
people in the industry and in the situation, because a lot of people will sit back and be like, oh, well, not everyone needs all these awesome things. And I'm like, yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm just saying, like, what, did you get into this for the aesthetic or did you get into this to do some fucking magic? Like,
Yeah.
did you get into it to make it work, to have the things you want? Because again, and to anyone who hears this, or just like any of my other interviews, if what I say vexes you because it makes you feel like maybe you're not very good at this, maybe take that as an opportunity and a challenge to train harder to get what you want. Because there's nothing that says that you can't enchant into your life the things you really want. It's just accepting that maybe you can. And then, of course, the struggle of, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, it worked. Holy shit, I have the thing I wanted and I'm terrified happens. That's another
Mhm.
story. That's
That
another
terror
story.
of being successful. Yeah. Yeah.
The terror of being so successful
Hmm.
and you know it could only come from magic.
Hmm. One of the,
That's the real one.
oh yeah. One of the funniest conversations looking back as an adult that I had with a friend of mine who was, he was and I'm going to use this term carefully, but with the kind of gravitas it deserves, a supposedly self-taught Thelemite. And I'm going to set that there and just let that thought sink in. Who, as a teenager, he embraced the full goth movements with, the all the accoutrement, the leather coats, the piercings, the, diehard punk rock attitude, and he was an artist, predictably. But his claim was that he was always doing magic and it was always working. But this poor guy lived in squalor for his entire life. And I remember talking with him years later. I was like, so man, how is life going right now? Because I know you're struggling in Chicago in art school. I know you have like 20 bucks to your name. How's the magic going? And then of course it's, the whole arrogance of, oh, I'm commanding spirits and do. And I'm like, yeah, but dude, you're sleeping on the floor and you're using one of your art lamps for warmth. Like, how actually successful are you? Or is this what you're kind of unintentionally conjuring into your life? Which is something we all do. We unintentionally
Oh, sure,
manifest
sure.
crap sometimes too. So it was one of those like eye-opening moments for him because, like you said, I fully believe, and eventually he came to the conclusion as well, that he was more pursuing the aesthetic of the, starving magician artist as opposed to being the, magician who steps fully into their power and carves the life out that they wanted. Which, it's good to see him actually reach that point. But at the same time, if I'm understanding what you said correctly and not misquoting you, that is such an important thing as to understand, are you pursuing the aesthetic or are you going to embrace that type of humbleness that the universe requires of magicians at a certain point to acknowledge you can go farther by accepting you can make mistakes.
Oh, sure. But I think in addition to that, it's not just the humbleness, it's also the hunger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I
Mm-hmm.
tell this to students of mine all the time. I'm like, like I always say, I'm like, we win in Alex camp. Like, you come to Alex camp, you gonna fucking win. Like, I don't let you fuck up. Like, if you're here, I will tell you in the bullet point list the spells you need to do to get what you want. But then you got to do it. You got to want it. And you got to be willing to engage in magical campaigns. You got to, because I also tell people it's never just one spell that gets you where you want to go. But like, I tell people, I'm like, you got to want it. You got to want it bad.
Yep.
And, you got to also want it unrelentingly. And that's the thing. And you got to accept, I tell this to students all the time, you got to accept that it's going to piss people off.
Mm-hmm.
You rock up with a partner that's way out of your league, suddenly being self-employed,
Mm-hmm.
working a fraction of the hours a month that your more conventional peers are, they're gonna
Mm-hmm.
hate you.
Oh yeah.
And especially if they go, well, you could never have had that without magic, and you go, yeah, I know,
Yeah.
but I got it. Like, sounds like a skill issue, homie. Like,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. And you got to be the kind of person who goes, no, I want what I want. Now a caveat to that, many in the year of our Lord 2024 are the long-term Golden Dawn type lodge magicians who
Mm.
haven't done Magic One for most of their lives, and at the ripe age of 45, they learn like one conjure candle spell that works, and they lose their goddamn minds, leave their wives and families, cheat on
Mm.
everybody, curse everybody,
Mm.
do magic to ensorcel a 20-year-old stripper who eventually takes them for everything. Now, am I
Mm.
talking about an individual person? Yes, I am. I'm
Yeah, it
talking about
sounds familiar.
several individual people. Yes, I am. And you know what? I warned him. I warned all you motherfuckers. If you hear this, I warned you, and you didn't listen. But the thing is, so you can get lost in the sauce. But as we
Hmm.
know, he without sauce is surely lost, even if he
Hmm.
can get lost in the sauce. Jesus said that, I believe. But
That sounds prophetic.
it
Yeah.
is, yeah. But truly, like, you need to be able to walk that razor's edge of like,
Hmm.
I'm gonna have what the fuck I want to have, come hell or high water, because I want a beautiful life. I want an astonishing life. And anyone who has the magic, anyone who does this, you can do it. You can get
Hmm.
it. You just gotta want it. And you gotta yearn for it, and you gotta enchant for it, and you gotta have that amazing life because of magic. Enchant actively. This is the thing I tell people. How do I have a more magical life? Do a spell
Yeah.
that is geared towards your life being more magical.
Yeah. That should always be the first sigil you do. The first sigil a person ever makes is in sigil magic, anyways, my sigils will work.
Yeah,
And
no,
from
that's
there,
yeah,
you just chain it together and build your goddamn life.
absolutely. But I
Yeah.
mean, it's also like, if you're like, oh yeah, I really want like a really cool like mentor. I'm like, all right, do a road
Mhm.
opener for one.
Yeah.
Like do a spell to get you a cool mentor. But also like I'm a big fan of the always be conjuring concept.
Hmm.
Like I tell my students, I'm like, how many spells you do a year? Yeah, I
Hmm.
don't know. If it's less than 250, you're fucking up.
Yeah. You're just
Like
not working hard enough.
you gotta be casting spells. You gotta be conjuring, even when you can't think of anything. It's one of the
Hmm.
reasons why I'm such a big fan of the banks and image stuff, because it's like you gotta constantly think about what you want and
Hmm.
keep adding to your list as you get the cool
Yeah.
stuff you want from it.
Oh, the
It
20 minimum image.
yep,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, but it
Yep.
teaches you how to want.
Hmm.
It teaches you how to effectively yearn. And that's
Yeah.
the thing, because I mean I've seen people, and again, now, I'm not saying this is me for the record saying I do not condone deeply compulsory love magic. I don't do it.
Mm. Yeah.
And I don't do it simply because for purely ethical reasons. I think that while it works, and again, I'm here to tell you, I'm not gonna lie to you, that shit works. Anyone who
Hmm.
tells you that you can't puppet master someone's lying.
They're wrong.
If you are
Yeah.
good enough, I mean, anyone who has a hypnosis background knows that.
Hmm.
Anybody who has a magical background of any serious kind knows that. You can brain scoop a motherfucker.
Hmm.
Like, and I'm not saying you should. I'm
Yeah.
saying that, like, if you want the dream partner, because that's the thing too. In my industry, the love question is the hardest
Hmm.
question to answer
Yep.
because the current zeitgeist, everyone's clamoring, everyone's lonely, everyone's touched starved, everyone's sad, no one's getting laid.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to do that kind of thing. Cool. But there's the solid win, and there's there's the dirty win, and then there's the really dirty win. I'm just saying, you can have what you want. You don't have to be a cretin about it
Hmm.
either.
Yeah. Creep is always optional, but should definitely be the last card in the deck that you play. Uh,
Absolutely,
is
absolutely.
something I tell all my hypnosis students because unfortunately we get a lot of people from the pickup artist community who I unequivocally will always snub and put down, who
Sure, but I
come
mean, but
in.
it works.
It does. It works. And, I actually have studied a lot of that stuff in order to find its therapeutic value, which is actually astounding because anyone who can seduce anyone, even not using magic, just pure hypnosis and neurology,
Mm,
when it can seduce someone into thinking the 65-year-old man should be attracted to this 19-year-old girl, creep, um, can seduce somebody into believing into themselves that they can quit smoking, for example, or lead a more productive life or get over heartbreak. So,
sure, yeah, no,
yeah,
I could definitely see that. Yeah, but
yeah.
that's the thing. I mean, but it's speaking of. So speaking of,
Mhm.
we'll go there. Speaking of
Yeah.
the 60-year-old guy with a 19-year-old wife, the
Hmm.
number of magicians in my life since age 13 that I have run across who are that guy.
Oof. Yeah.
And I mean, are that guy. And again, and I'm not talking about, oh, they got their comeuppance in the end. They didn't.
Hmm.
And I mean, I'm talking about died in bed,
Hmm.
happy at the ripe old age of whatever, surrounded
Hmm.
by their treasures, including their young trophy wife.
Hmm.
Just because it can be done doesn't mean it ought to be done. But as I am dedicated to presenting the reality of magic in its depth and breadth,
Hmm.
like I'm the one who's over here, like, you can make miracles. There are also dark miracles. There are
Oh
also
yeah.
bad miracles in the world. And those things are done. And given the fact that our world is not getting any nicer,
Hmm.
the economic recession we are currently in is probably never going to go away.
Yeah.
People are getting toothier and thornier, which is also one of the reasons why my first classes I ever put out were my protection magic classes, which, hey,
Oh
you know
yeah.
what? You got it.
Hmm.
It's another thing I tell my students because they always ask, like, how do I know, if I'm under a love spell? And I tell them, oh, look for intrusive thoughts and look for these signs and do divinations and do cleansings.
Hmm.
It's like, if you're worried about the world getting fucking, if you're worried about these kind of things, and I entreat this, anybody who is worried listening to this about that creepy 75-year-old man rocking up on your ass, man or
Hmm.
woman, because it happens on both.
Hmm.
Uh, and I'm not saying there aren't creepy 70-year-old women who do the same thing. There are. That's another thing.
Oh
That's
yeah.
another myth that needs to be busted. They are just as bad,
Oh
uh,
yeah.
even if people don't really like to admit that. But if you're worried about that, learn to protect yourself. This is,
Yeah.
again, a very real thing that is real. And when the rubber hits the road, there is no police for this.
Oh, not at all. I
You
mean,
are on your
yeah.
own.
Yeah. You want to prosecute somebody for magic? Good luck. I
Not
mean,
even,
that's.
I'm talking about, like, here's another thing, and this thing I bring up because it's a savage truth. But like, let's
Hmm.
say somebody does you dirty, another sorcerer really hurts you.
Hmm.
Go to a lot of other people and be like, we need to fuck this guy up, and they'll be like, I don't know, man. Like, he can hurt me too. I got kids, for example. I don't really have children, but like, if you do,
Yeah.
they're like, oh, I got kids, I got this, I got that. There's a lot of things he can kick the legs out from under if I roll up and, on some revenge arc shit.
Hmm.
People don't have consequences in this game like
Oh
people
yeah.
think they do. You need
Yeah.
to be the consequences for people who fuck with you.
Yeah, I think it's Jim Butcher, one of his characters in the Dresden Files, Michael Carpenter, Knight of the Cross, said sometimes, what goes around comes around, or the law of three, right? Sometimes you are what goes around. And that's a very real thing to think about. Like sometimes, yeah, magically, physically, whatever, sometimes some people need a foot in the ass in order to hopefully straighten their shit out.
You got to be that. You got to be capable of being that foot in the ass and willing to take the risk on. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
when I talk about how real this is, I always try to give it a three-dimensional reality or three-dimensional scope because
Hmm.
there was this prevailing idea for the longest time that nobody really did bad shit to people with this. And not only was that cartoonishly wrong,
Hmm.
but it is even more so now
Yeah.
because the information, we live in a golden age of information where people can learn all sorts of magic. You can pirate all sorts of people's courses and shit. I'm not saying you should,
Hmm.
but it is a done thing.
Hmm.
So people can learn all manner of bad shit. There are whole ass Discord servers out there about cursing and teaching you how to do bad magic and stuff. Like, it's out there if you know where to look.
Hmm.
So to think the world hasn't changed in that way is willfully naive and dangerous. A colleague of mine, Hoodoo Moses, and I were talking one time. Shout out to Moses, cool guy. Um, but he was saying something like, he's like, yeah, like back when I was a kid, your school bully didn't really know how to fight. Now your school bully takes MMA on the weekends.
Yeah.
The game has changed, so you need to be able to respond much more aggressively.
Mhm.
Your defenses need to be much better. You need to take an active role as opposed to a passive one, because I can't even tell you the amount of I'm divinely protected spiritual people you see on the internet.com.org.gov who come to
Oh
people
boy.
like me in the shadows and go, yes, the sorcerer has wounded me again. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm just saying it's a game we play for keeps.
Oh yeah.
Wonderful as it can be, and it can and it will if you treat it right.
Mhm.
There are some dark alleys in this game too,
Yeah.
and people live in them, and they are happy to be there.
And it is to add on to that, I think it is so important for people to be able to protect themselves in situations of power dynamics like morally bankrupt or abusive bosses.
Oh, sure,
Uh,
sure.
yeah, I remember this one place that I worked at, which I mean, they're litigious as hell, so I'm not going to name any names, but had an abusive little business consultant who nearly broke one of my friends who worked there, who was witch curious. But she had mentioned how this guy had just ripped her a new one for not going to see her sick dad on Thanksgiving. So me and a friend just did a certain thing, and the next day he's in the hospital with a shingles outbreak from hell. And do I feel bad about it? No, not at all. Had to happen because sometimes people need a lesson in manners and it doesn't kill anybody. But there's definitely the darker element out there, like you said, where so many people can just literally go to a Discord server and purchase a curse from a stranger, which may or may not work. Who knows? but
Or
it
they can go to
is.
a Discord server and learn that curse. You know what I mean? That's the thing. I
Mhm,
mean, a lot of it is teaching. You know, it's funny when you bring up like protecting yourself against bosses. This is another
mhm.
spicy Alex opinion.
Here we go. Love
Your
it.
boss is not your friend. There's no such thing as a good boss.
Nope.
That's why I work for myself. That's why I'm self-employed because
Yeah.
I'm my boss. But the thing is, again, I told people this, every boss I ever had, I beat
Mhm,
the bricks off them with magic in ways that were
mhm.
borderline horrific to a lot of people. And I don't apologize for it once because that motherfucker had power over me and I would not
Yeah.
allow it. Because
Yeah.
I remember, here's another free one for people. You get your boss, you put him in a poppet. If you don't know how to put someone in
Mhm,
dolls, I have a class for that too. My effigies class. Hey.
mhm.
But I put him in a doll and you beat that doll with your belt and
Yep.
you yell at it, you scream at it, and you beat the bricks off of it. And then you wear that belt to work. And every time your boss gives you shit, you tap that belt. And if you did it right, he will flinch in actual pain.
Mhm.
And then you have power over him because he can be like, oh, you can't take that vacation. The fuck I can't.
Yep.
Like, oh no, no, sir, you are not telling me how to be. Because that's the thing. Old maps used to tell you where monsters
Mhm.
were.
Yeah.
New ones don't. The flaw in cartography is not your fault, but it is their problem.
Absolutely. And any situation where somebody is operating at a disadvantage in an unfair power dynamic, it doesn't matter if it is employment. Like I said, I love the fact that we both have bosses that we've had to like pop it or bottle before, but I can't think of a magician who hasn't been in that situation before. But even in political things, like I'm not going to name any names, but I have a specific targeted list for certain PACs who are trying to take away bodily autonomy. I mean, there's no reason not to use some of this stuff in the most responsible manner. Don't just go spraying, magical bullets everywhere. There's no reason not to make the world better for you and yours, even if that requires someone else having a couple of bad, lifetimes. That might just be my opinion. But
Yeah, I certainly don't disagree with you, to be honest. I mean, I got my own degree of it for sure, and
Mhm.
for to some it's a little bit more intense than what they would have, and for some it's not. But hey,
Yeah.
to each their own in that. But that's kind of the thing. I mean, a big part of learning this is accepting that you have become, once you're good at it, in a sense, you've become a minor law unto yourself.
Hmm.
You get to make choices, not just for your life, but for other people. And this is the part where I will always say that the vast majority of us are not saints. You can summon some saints if you want to learn how to summon some saints, but the vast majority of us are not truly amazingly moral people all the time. We all have skeletons in our closet. I think
Hmm.
that any occultist who tells you they don't is again lying. Because
Yeah.
just like an old teacher of mine a long time ago said, everyone who conjures has got something going on.
Hmm.
Even if it's the most minor sweet jar spell of all time, or you got people buried in a graveyard, or you have poppets of people chained up in your basement or whatever, you know, everyone's got something going on.
Hmm.
And that is a thing too. But if you're going to step into this world, you need to step into all of it
Oh
and
yeah, you
accept the whole of it.
yeah, you can't keep a foot in, each side of the doorway. You just got to walk through the whole damn doorway.
I agree. That's how it needs to be done. And that's my thought. And there are people out there who disagree with me, and they can be wrong. That is their right. That is
Yeah, definitely. That's one of the things I love about magic is there's so many different approaches. There's so many different ways to look at this, whacked out reality that we have. And despite what people who are just looking for a witch war, basically, but there's so much room when we're talking about the infinite possibility in magic that people can simply disagree. And if they're mature, go their separate ways. And if not, well, whatever happens, happens
yeah,
at that
it's
point.
real.
All right. Well, Alex has definitely been like the perfect podcast interview to bring this situation with my podcast back, and I appreciate you being here. Where can people go to find all your amazing work?
Well, I'm glad to have been here. You can find my stuff on practicaloccult.com. I'm the guy who does the classes, the spell work, the readings, and all that. My business partner Allison is the one who makes the amulets, all the pentacles, all those wonderful things that we sell.
Hmm.
Uh, you can also find me on the Hexdoctor on Instagram. My Instagram stories are legendary. My memes are
Oh
fire.
yeah.
My anime taste is immaculate. My music taste is even better. My role-playing game taste is even better. If you want to bask in my glory, feel fucking free. Like you're welcome
There
in
you go.
advance, to be honest. And yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, excellent. All right. Well, I will definitely be sending as many people as are curious off to go look at those memes and Instagram reels, which were what originally caught my eye. And your central work hidden in there is pretty impressive as well, not to blow it out of the water or anything like that. But the hidden messages there, I think, are pretty interesting.
Well, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, like I said, thanks for coming in. I'm
Glad
going
to
to
be
go
here, dude. Glad
ahead,
to be here.
let you get on with your day, brother, and you have yourself a wonderful afternoon. All right.
I intend to, man. Later.
Thank you.